Airlines are working to keep up with the 4th of July travel rush.
Well, this comes as storms have caused thousands of flights to be canceled or delayed this week. AAA projects that more than 50 million people expect to travel this weekend. And that would break the record set in 2019. Roughly 43 million people are expected to travel by car, while more than 4 million are expected to fly. CBS News senior transportation correspondent Kris Van Cleave joins us now from Phoenix. Kris, tell us, how are people feeling in the airport right now? Some of that frustration dissipated, or are folks still tense?
Well, it really depends on where you're trying to get to. Pretty good flying conditions here in Phoenix. So the delays that we're seeing at this airport have a lot to do with the weather and the situation in other places. Flyers we've talked to for the last few days have certainly been aware of the challenges this week, and all hopeful that it doesn't happen to them. You do have people that are just now getting home from their flights that were canceled days ago, and there will be folks that will be dealing with these disruptions for days to come. And there remain some real concerns about storms. Because of the way this sort of heat dome thing is set up, you're getting thunderstorms in sort of the same places day in and day out. Denver must feel like they're in like Groundhog Day because they're getting these nasty thunderstorms every day, and that is snarling flights in and out of Denver. And you have 3 airlines that use that as a pretty big hub: United, Southwest, and Frontier. Chicago is another city of concern. There are some airports on the East Coast that could see some disruptions, or arrival and departure rates slowed down as the day goes on. So there are points of concern, but folks here are excited to get where they're going and hopeful that they get there more or less on time.
And Kris, while weather has caused a lot of the cancellations and delays, as I understand it, the FAA was already expecting staffing shortages this summer. So how much of those shortages contributed to some of these disruptions?
Well, United certainly felt that FAA staffing was a fairly significant factor on Saturday, particularly in the New York area, where there was not a lot of weather issues going on. JetBlue also sent out a note to employees this week that was critical of the FAA. But the vast majority of the disruptions we have seen Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, anything that we see today, this is largely all driven by bad weather. If there are thunderstorms around an airport, that airport is just basically going to have to wait till the storm passes. And you have seen a couple of major cities like New York, Chicago, Denver see these storms day in and day out. The weather really has been the driver of a lot of this disruption. FAA staffing is an issue. We're also at the end of the month, so airline employees, flight attendants, pilots have a limit to how many hours they can work in a month. Some folks will start hitting those numbers as well.
That's a very interesting and astute point, Kris. We know that sometimes that these travel delays happen, but what I think is always so striking is when you see those passengers forced to sleep overnight in airports because of storms. Do they have any recourse? We understand the acts of God, provision that protects the airlines, but it just sort of feels like maybe there should be better accommodations for people who are stuck in the airport day after day.
The airlines, when it comes to weather, their responsibilities are markedly different than if it's a delay or cancellation that's the fault of the airline, because no one can control the weather. And what the airlines try to do is proactively cancel flights they think won't go, so that your flight's not going to take off before you leave your hotel or before you leave your home. You ended up in a circumstance this week, particularly with United, where the disruptions were snowballing, and so you had cancellations of flights once people were already at the airport. And that's sort of when you start to get into these situations where people get stuck. Hotel rooms start to run short, and it's a severe weather event, so getting a car, getting a cab, getting an Uber out of there can be challenging. But at least under the current set of regulations, the airlines are not necessarily obligated to find those people hotel rooms when there's a weather-caused cancellation. The Department of Transportation is looking at changing some regulations, but there's always going to be a carve-out for weather because it's truly just out of their control.
All right, Kris Van Cleave for us. Kris, thank you.